Lucien thinks he's all that in court until Judge Caprio brings him down to earth. What happens when Brandon Whitmore III, 33-year-old heir to the Whitmore fortune construction, worth approximately $600 million, built for 3 generations since his great-grandfather founded the company in 1920, building commercial buildings in Rhode Island and Massachusetts before expand nationally. Son of Brandon Whitmore Jr., who is currently CEO of the company, but the one who has been preparing Brandon Terse for eventually take executive control, although everyone in the family and in the company knows that Brandon is incompetent, lazy, and just getting by, completely in the family name without having contributed anything of value for 10 years, nominally working in the business development department, where his main achievement is occasionally showing up to meetings and sign documents prepared by others, who lives in a mansion of 11,000 square feet exclusive to New Patata for $18 million that his father bought him a collection of luxury cars as a birthday present when he turned 30. It includes the Ferrari SF90 Estradale, Lamborghini Aventador, Porsche Cayenne Turbo S, and Mercedes AMG GT Black Series, with a combined value exceeding $2 million, who is known in Rhode Island's elite social circles as that insufferable guy, because he constantly reminds everyone about his wealth and connections, and presumably important surname W. Moore, as if that made him superior to humans ordinary, who has been arrested 3 times previously for driving under the influence, but each time his father hired better criminal defense lawyers in the state who managed reduced charges or reach agreements that resulted in probation and mandatory classes instead of jail time that anyone else would have received. Enters Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom in Providence Municipal Court to hearing on his 4th DUI charge after being arrested 6 weeks ago, driving his Ferrari at 120 miles per hour in a residential area at 2 a.m. tomorrow with a blood alcohol level of 0.19%, more than double the legal limit of 0.08 after leaving a nightclub exclusive, where he spent approximately 0.00 on bottles of champagne, Dom Perignon, and vodka Grey Goose to impress Pincentos, a group of young women whom he had just met, but instead of showing remorse or humility, appropriate for someone facing his 4th DUI, which under Rhode Island laws carries minimum sentence mandatory 1 year in state prison, plus permanent loss of license, plus massive fines. Brandon enters with an attitude that only he can, to describe oneself as totally hallucinating, a perfect Mexican term. To describe someone who is completely delusional about his own importance, walking with exaggerated swag, as if she were on a fashion runway instead of a cutting room, wearing a $1,000 Brioni suit, wearing $3,000 Berluti shoes, and a Richard Mille watch on his wrist worth approximately $500,000, because he apparently thought that showing obscene wealth in courtroom, where judges deciding whether to send him to prison, was a brilliant strategy, accompanied by his lawyer Vincent Sterling from the firm Sterling & Associates, who charges per hour, and who clearly told Brandon to act humble and repentant, but advice that Brandon, he obviously ignored it completely. And when Al Goyle calls his case and Brandon, he approaches the podium in front of Judge Caprio instead of standing respectfully with hands at your sides like anyone with half a brain would, Brandon. He leans casually against the podium as if he were in a bar. He takes out his iPhone 14 Pro Max phone with 24-karat gold case that probably it cost $5,000 just for the case, and starts reviewing messages as if the judge were present and the entire legal proceedings were irrelevant to him, because in his mind, distorted from a privileged hallucination, he is too important to lend full attention to something as mundane as being prosecuted for endangering the lives of innocent citizens are at risk from drunk driving at lethal speeds. This Lucien is about to discovering that treating the courtroom as a minor inconvenience that can be ignored. While checking Instagram, he shows zero respect for the judge who has power, literally sending him to prison for a year or more and assuming his last name is Whitmore and Dad's money will automatically protect him without him even having to make the slightest effort to pretend. Regret, it's not a smart strategy, but legal suicide, which will provoke fury from judge, who has seen thousands of DUI cases over 38 years, and who has hatred particularly by drunk drivers, privileged people who think that rules they don't apply to them, and that when Judge Caprio observes Brandon ignoring him completely while looking at her phone and finally says in a voice that cuts off, she cracked across the room like a whip, "Mr. Whitmore, I'm interrupting. Is there anything on that phone more important than the fact that he's facing a year in state prison?" Brandon has the audacity to look up at his phone with an annoyed expression as if he were a judge. It is the one being unreasonable, and he responds with words that will seal his fate. Fate. Look, Judge, with all due respect, we both know how this is going to end. My lawyer and the prosecutor will reach some kind of agreement. I'll pay a fine I can easily afford. Maybe I'll take a few more stupid classes and we'll move on. Then maybe we can speed this up because I have an important lunch in an hour at Providence Oyster Bar and I really don't want to. I might be late. Judge Caprio's next words transform Brandon's arrogance into terror when the judge says with icy coldness, "Mr. Whitmore, you have just made one more mistake great of his privileged life. He has just assumed that I will allow an agreement that this fourth one will be managed like the previous three, where money from his father and expensive lawyers allowed him to avoid real consequences. But this is I'm in the room and I decide what happens here. And what's going to happen is that I'm going to reject it. Any agreement the prosecutor proposes, I will order a full trial and I personally assure you that if you are found guilty, which it will be because the evidence is overwhelming, you will receive maximum sentence allowed under the law because drunk drivers like you are a public danger who will eventually kill someone if they are not stopped. Your lunch at Providence Oyster Bar will have to wait because I just cancel his bail and order that he be taken into custody immediately until trial. We need to know what city you're watching from because what's coming will show you that in the United States, being rich and having a famous last name doesn't make you untouchable. When the privileged Lucene finally finds a judge he refuses to be impressed by money or intimidated by expensive lawyers, the fall from that delusion is spectacular and satisfying. Go for it, like if you believe arrogant rich people deserve equal justice. Subscribe for more. Cases where privilege meets reality and comments from which city you're seeing this because only 3% of those who see it like it. It's a Tuesday. So, tomorrow, December 19th, exactly 6 days before Christmas in Court Municipal Building of Providence, Rhode Island. And there's a particular atmosphere in the building because the holidays are approaching and many court employees are thinking about their upcoming vacations and gifts. They need to buy things for family dinners they're planning. The atmosphere is generally more relaxed and festive than usual, but that atmosphere is about to be interrupted. Dramatically, when Brandon Whitmore arrives at the courthouse 10:05, 5 minutes before his scheduled hearing at 10 o'clock, no, not because he is a punctual person, but because his lawyer, Vincent Sterling, sent him 3 text messages that morning insisting that I arrive on time and not. That would give the judge additional reason to be upset with him. Advice that Brandon. He continued reluctantly because even in his perpetual state, Dewson recognizes vaguely that this fourth Dewey is more serious than the previous 3, and that he should probably at least appear in court on time, even though he can't be bothered to take the procedure. Seriously beyond that. Brandon arrives driving his Ferrari SF90 Estradale 500,000. Hybrid car that combines a V8 engine of gasoline with 3 electric motors producing a combined 1030 horsepower power. Acceleration from 0 to 60 mph in 2.5 seconds, top speed of 201 mph, and price that represents more than the average Rhode Island worker earns in 10 years of full-time work. Parked directly in front of the main entrance of the building, cut into space, clearly marked as reserved for official vehicles. The mind completely ignoring signage because in their life experience, the rules about where to park, like most rules, these are suggestions that don't really apply to people like him. Officials of court building security, who are standing near the entrance, immediately notice the parked Ferrari illegally, and one of them, a veteran named Marcus Thompson, who has he worked in cutting safety for 17 years, and approaches to tell the A driver needs to move a vehicle, but by the time Marcus arrives, she's already out of the car and is walking toward the building entrance without even looking back. And when Marcus yells at him, "Sir, you can't park there. Park." She waves her hand without turning around in a dismissal gesture, which clearly communicates, "I don't like it. It matters, you handle it." Marcus considers having Ferrari towed immediately, but decides to wait. Because he doesn't want to cause a bigger scene before an audience, and because he assumes that after the hearing the driver can address the problem directly. This decision will be one of many small moments of grace that court staff will make. It shows Brandon that he won't even notice or appreciate. Brandon enters the building wearing what he considers his court attire that he bought specifically for this hearing ago, 2 days in one of Boston's most expensive designer boutiques. Suit Brioni 3-piece suit in dark navy that costs $15,000 because Brioni is one of the most prestigious Italian fashion houses known for. Their handmade costumes require approximately 18 hours of work. Handmade white shirt suit from Kitten that cost $800 because apparently he couldn't just buy a $100 white shirt, that he wore an identical tie, a $500 Hermes with a chain pattern that he thinks is elegant, but it really just screams tasteless nouveau riche, Berluti shoes, leather with a hand-painted patina that cost $0,000 because I needed shoes that cost more than the average person's monthly income. Gold cufflinks with initials baby's third earring encrusted with small diamonds that cost $2,500, and on his left wrist a Richard M. RM5 watch worth approximately $500,000. Such an obscenely expensive piece of watchmaking that its price could pay for the complete university education of 10 students, or you could buy a decent house in most parts of the United States. A watch that Brandon wears specifically to impress and intimidate because in his experience, when people see that watch, they immediately understand that they're dealing with someone in a completely different financial league. Blonde hair is styled in a way that probably cost $200 at a high-end salon range that morning with enough product to keep it perfectly in place, but not too much. It should obviously look like it has gel, a difficult balance that only stylists can achieve. Expensive things can be achieved. Face is perfectly shaved. Skin has a healthy glow from someone who gets regular facials. Teeth are bright white, the result of professional whitening, and her entire appearance exudes wealth. It would be serious, but it would also be something more. A feeling of superiority in someone who believes that his money and status place him above ordinary people. To Lucine, who genuinely thinks he is better than everyone else, simply because he was lucky to be born into the right family. He goes through a metal detector. At the building entrance where the Richard Mill clock with its complicated mechanism, the alarm goes off, and when a security officer asks him to remove his watch, to go through the detector again, Brandon makes a show of removing it very slowly while saying in a voice loud enough for multiple people listen, "This watch is worth $100,000, so I hope you're careful with him." Completely unnecessary comment designed to ensure everyone around knows how rich he is. Comment which causes several court employees and citizens passing through security to roll his eyes because the guy was showing off his expensive watch in a courthouse full of people who are here because they can't pay traffic fines or are struggling with financial problems. That's precisely the kind of insane behavior that makes people hate him instantly. He picks up his watch afterward. She goes through security and places it back on her wrist with exaggerated care. Then she walks toward the elevators with a gait that's more swag than a normal walk. A movement that communicates confidence, but it really just makes him look ridiculous as a high school basketball player trying to act cool. Arrive at Judge Caprio's courtroom on the 3rd floor of the building. Cutoff time at 9:58, 2 minutes before the scheduled time of the courtroom and his lawyer, Vincent Sterling, are already waiting outside. Man, a 52-year-old wearing a conservative gray suit that probably costs $3,000. But next to Brandon's $1,000 outfit, it seems almost modest, who has represented Brandon in his 3 previous dias, and who has managed each time negotiated favorable agreements that kept Brandon out of prison, and they allowed him to maintain his license with minimal suspensions. This track record of success has led to Brandon assumes that Vincent can simply make legal magic happen, no matter what. His dangerous position, which Vincent has tried to correct multiple times without success. "Brandon, you're here," Vincent says in a tone that it's a mix of relief and worry. "Of course I arrived. You said I had to be here at 10, she replies. Brandon, as if he deserves credit for doing the absolute minimum required. Vincent. She glances at Brandon's outfit and her expression becomes more worried. "Brandon, we talked about this. I told you to dress conservatively understated. That watch on your wrist, it's probably worth more than the judge's annual income. Did you really think it was a good idea to use it?" "Cut?" Brandon looks at his watch as if Vincent had said something absurd. "It's just watch, Vincent. Besides, I'm not going to hide who I am to impress anyone. Municipal judge, he probably doesn't even know what kind of clock it is." Vincent sighs, acknowledging that he is wasting time trying to reason with Brandon about this. "Okay, look, just remember what we talked about. When you're in front of the judge, be respectful. Address him as Your Honor. Do not interrupt. Do not use your phone. Do not make comments. Sarcastic. Show genuine remorse for your actions. Admit that you have a problem with alcohol and you're looking for help. I've been negotiating with fiscal and I believe I can reach a similar agreement to previous times, such 6 months of probation. Mandatory alcohol classes, fine of $5,000, 6-month license suspension, but I need the judge to see that you're taking. I'm serious. Yes, I'll be a good kid, I promise." Brandon says in a serious tone, who has zero sincerity, a tone that worries Vincent even more. But there's no time for more conversation, because the courtroom doors open and Alua Shil starts calling people to enter. The cutting room fills up quickly with approximately 40 people waiting for various traffic cases, DUIs, minor violations. Brandon and Vincent sit in the 3rd row of gallery benches. Vincent reviewing his notes and case files while Brandon immediately pulls out his iPhone and starts browsing Instagram, looking at photos of his rich friends on vacation in St. Bart's and Aspen, occasionally making quiet comments to Vincent about what private jet did someone charter or what villa did someone rent. Comments that Vincent is unaware because he is trying to concentrate on case preparation. Judge Frank Caprio enters at exactly 10 o'clock, a 77-year-old man wearing a traditional black judicial robe, walking with a firm step which belies his age, climbing to his elevated seat behind the dark wooden dais that overlooks the courtroom. "Good morning," the judge says to the packed courtroom. "Everyone stand," announces Robert Gucci. Chen and everyone else in the room get up except for Brandon, who is so absorbed on his phone, which he doesn't notice until Vincent elbows him hard in the ribs, making him look up with irritation before finally getting up several seconds later, all the others, behavior that the judge notices and mentally files away as the first an indicator that this particular defendant may be problematic. During the following time, Judge handles approximately 12 cases before Brandon's case. Mixed parking tickets, speeding, and other minor violations that processes with its characteristic mix of efficiency, fairness, and occasional compassion when circumstances warrant it. Brandon is almost bored until death during this process, sighing audibly, changing from constantly checking their phone every 30 seconds, despite Vincent whispering to her 3 times to put the phone away. Finally, at one point, putting on AirPods to listen to music or podcast, until Vincent rips one out of his ear, and if he's lucky, "What the hell? What are you doing? Are you in the cutting room?" Brandon rolls his eyes, but he reluctantly removes his headphones. Finally, at approximately 11:10, sheriff calls. State of Rhode Island versus Brandon Whitmore. Case number 239458. Charge of driving under the influence. 4th, offense. Brandon gets up, stretches his arms above his head with a yawn, exaggerated as if he had been waiting too long for something tedious, and walks toward the defendant's podium with that same exaggerated sugar daddy he used when he entered the building. Vincent joins. He sat at the defense table, opening his briefcase and taking out carefully organized files. The prosecutor handling the case is a 42-year-old woman named Jennifer Martinez, who has been an assistant prosecutor in the state attorney's office for 18 years and who has literally handled hundreds of DOI cases during his career, who acknowledges Whitmore's name immediately because she has processed Brandon's 3 previous DEIs, and who is frankly fed up with seeing this privileged hallucination to receive favorable agreements repeatedly when anyone without money would be in prison after the second day. Good. Days, Your Honor, says Prosecutor Martinez. This case involves DEI's 4th offense by Mr. Whitmore, who was arrested on November 5th at approximately 2:05 a.m. after a patrol officer spotted him driving a Ferrari at an estimated speed of 120 mph in a residential area of 35 millipore on Elmwood Avenue. When the officer initiated the traffic stop, Mr. Whitmore initially did not stop. He continued for approximately half a mile, before finally stopping. When the officer approached the vehicle, he immediately smelled strong alcohol. He noticed Mr. Whitmore's eyes were bloodshot and his speech was dragged. Breath test at the scene indicated a blood alcohol level of 0.19%, more than double the legal limit. Mr. W. Moore refused to take tests. Countryside sobriety. He was arrested and prosecuted. Your Honor, I must note that this is Mr. Whitmore's 4th offense. He was previously convicted in 2015, 2018, and 2021. In each previous case, he received favorable agreements that resulted in parole and mandatory classes, but without time to significant jail time. The state believes Mr. Whitmore poses a public danger, serious and must face the maximum consequences under the law. Judge Caprio is reviewing the case file while the prosecutor speaks, his eyebrows rising gradually while reading Brandon's history. 3 previous DUIs, each with alcohol levels significantly above the legal limit, each resulting in settlements that kept Brandon out of prison, a pattern that clearly indicates prior agreements. They had no deterrent effect whatsoever. The judge looks up at the documents and observes Brandon, who, he's standing on the podium, but instead of looking at the judge or paying attention to the procedure, he's looking his phone, head tilted downwards, thumb sliding across the screen, completely absorbed in whatever he's watching. Judge Caprio feels his A-life of irritation, but he maintains professional composure. Mr. Whore. The judge speaks in a clear voice designed to capture attention. Brandon doesn't respond, still looking at his phone. Mr. Whitmore, the judge repeats, more volume and authority. This time Brandon looks up with a surprised expression, as if he had just realized that someone was talking to him. Yes, he says, without your honor, without apology for not paying attention, just yes, as if a judge. The waiter was interrupting his meal. Judge Caprio inhaled deeply, exercising considerable self-control. Mr. W. Moore, I'm interrupting you. There. Something on that phone is more important than the fact that he's facing a year in state prison. Brandon has the audacity to look at the judge with an expression that is a mixture of annoyance and disbelief, as if the judge were the one he's being unreasonable. Look, Judge, he starts, and it's already a mistake because he didn't use your honor. With all due respect, we both know how this is going to end. My lawyer and the prosecutor will reach some kind of agreement. I'll pay a fine which, frankly, I can afford, easily. Maybe I'll take some stupid classes again, like I did the 3 times before, and we'll move on with our lives. So maybe we can speed this up because I have an important lunch in an hour at Providence Oyster Bar, and I might be late. There's a moment of absolute silence in the room while each person present, from prosecutor to bailiff to other defendants, awaiting their cases process what Brandon just said, because in the space of 30 seconds, Brandon has shown a complete lack of respect for the judge. He has assumed that the outcome is predetermined in their favor. It has been characterized as having serious legal consequences, such as some classes, stupid. She boasted about her wealth and suggested her lunch was more, it is important to know what legal proceedings could send him to prison. Such a spectacular display of privileged hallucination, it is almost breathtaking in his complete lack of self-awareness. Vincent Sterling is pale, his face expression of horror, because his client has just destroyed any hope of a favorable agreement with approximately 50 words of pure arrogance. Prosecutor Martinez is smiling slightly because Brandon just made his job 100 times easier, showing the judge exactly the kind of person he is. And Judge Caprio, who in 38 years has seen all kinds of defendants, from humble to arrogant, but rarely has, having seen someone be so openly contemptuous, he feels anger rising, but channels it into icy coldness. "Mr. Whitmore," says the judge in a voice that is dangerously calm, a kind of calm that anyone with experience in cutting rooms immediately recognizes as storm precursor. She just made the biggest mistake of her life, privileged. Brandon still doesn't understand, looking at the judge in confusion. He just assumed that I would allow an agreement that this room would be managed like the 3 previous ones where his father's money and expensive lawyers allowed him to avoid real consequences. But let me clarify something for you, Mr. Whitmore. This is my courtroom, and I decide what happens here. The judge pauses to let the words settle, and what will happen is the following. I'm going to reject any agreement the prosecutor proposes. I will order this case to go to full trial, and I will personally oversee it to ensure that if he is found guilty, which will be because the evidence is overwhelming, with a blood alcohol level twice the legal limit, and an officer testifying that you were driving at 120 miles per hour in a residential area, endangering the lives of families, sleeping in risk, with his history of 3 previous DUIs, proving that past deals taught him nothing. He will receive the maximum sentence allowed by law. Brandon is beginning to understand. The situation isn't going as planned. Your Honor, I haven't finished. The judge interrupts authoritatively, causing Brandon to immediately shut up. Drunk drivers like you are a public danger, Mr. Who. Really, if you are not stopped, you are going to kill someone. He's going to run over a mother walking with her baby. He's going to crash into a family on their way home, at dinner. He's going to destroy innocent lives, and then, with his money and lawyers, he'll do it. He'll probably try to buy his way out of that too, but not in my courtroom, not anymore. The judge looks at the prosecutor. Martinez. Prosecutor Martinez. Withdraw any plea bargain offer you have made. Gladly, Your Honor, he replies, Martinez. And Mr. Hoare, regarding your lunch at Providence Oyster Bar, the judge continued, I'm going to have to cancel it because I just revoked his bail and ordered that he be taken into immediate custody pending trial. What? Brandon shouts arrogantly, finally broken and replaced out of panic. She can't do that. Absolutely I can, and I just did. Alicil Chen, take custody of Mr. Whitmore, Robert Chen, 68-year-old Alueo, whom Brandon basically ignored when he entered the room earlier. Now he approaches with a small, satisfied smile, handcuffs in hand. Vincent Sterling tries to intervene. Your Honor, with all due respect, this is extremely unusual. My client has strong ties to the community. There is no flight risk. The client has shown at the last minute that he believes he is above the law, that the procedures of this court are a minor inconvenience and show absolute contempt for the judicial system. That makes it risky. Order is maintained. Brandon is breathing rapidly. Now, panic is setting in as the reality of the situation finally sinks in. Your bubble of privilege. Your Honor, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. Regarding that, I should have thought about that before entering my room, acting like Lucen, who believes which rules don't apply to him. The handcuffs click around Brandon's wrists, a sound that is absurdly strong in a quiet room. His $500,000 Richard Mille watch It is visible just above the metal wife and the position that encapsulates a perfectly absurd situation. A man with $500,000 in his A-man was arrested because he thought his money made him untouchable. Your Honor, please. Brandon is now begging for all the arrogance, evaporated. I have a family. I have a job. I should have thought about her family before driving drunk for the fourth time. He should have thought about his job before putting lives in danger. Trial date set for January 18th. Mr. Whitmore will spend the next 4 weeks at the Rhode Island Correctional Facility contemplating his choices. Perhaps that time will give him perspective that money will provide. His father has not provided it. Brandon is still being led out of the room, protesting, his voice growing more desperate as he walked away. Vincent Sterling is gathering his documents with trembling hands, knowing that he has just witnessed total disaster. Judge Caprio calls the next case as if nothing extraordinary had happened, but everyone in the room was buzzing with energy of what they had just witnessed. For the next 4 weeks, Brandon experienced a reality you never imagined. Prison. Rhode Island Correctional Facility. Island is not a maximum security prison, but it's not a resort either. For someone accustomed to an $18 million mansion and 1,000 thread count sheets, an 8 by 10 foot cell with a bunk bed of metal and a paper-thin mattress, it's a brutal clash. Share Zelda with a man accused of car theft, who finds it immensely amusing that a rich kid, he's in prison for God's sake. The food is almost inedible for someone used to 5-star restaurants. There's no privacy, no comfort, no way to escape the reality that the consequences are finally catching up with him. His father, Brandon Jr., visits after 3 days, and the conversation is tense. Dad, you have to get me out of here, Brandon pleads. I've already hired better lawyers from Boston. They're working on appealing the judge's decision. You can't appeal, Brandon. Judge, he has the right to revoke bail. And frankly, after hearing what you told him, I understand why he did it. What were you thinking? I wasn't thinking. I was assuming it would be like the previous times. That's the problem, Brandon. You always assume. You assume that money protects you. You assume that the surname Whitmore means that rules don't apply. They apply. Well, you met a judge who isn't impressed by any of that stuff. His father leaves after 20 minutes, leaving Brandon alone with his thoughts for the first time in his life, privileged. Trial begins on January 18th. Brandon is brought from prison in orange uniform, no longer wearing Brioni and Richard Mill, but prison clothes standard. He looks emaciated after 4 weeks. He has lost approximately 15 pounds. He has dark circles under his eyes. Vincent Sterling has brought equipment of 4 additional lawyers from a prestigious Boston firm to handle defense, but the evidence is overwhelming. Patrol dashboard video showing Brandon's Ferrari being driven erratically at excessive speed. Breath test showing 0.19. Official testimony of 3-year history, previous tests, defense attempts to argue that the breath test was administered incorrectly, that the stop was illegal, that Brandon has a drinking problem and needs treatment, no prison. But Prosecutor Martinez methodically dismantles each argument. Jury of 6 people deliberate for approximately 3 hours before return with verdict, guilty on all counts. Sentencing hearing. It is scheduled for 2 weeks later. Sentencing day in the courtroom is on. Brandon's family is full of reporters because the case has become local news about the heir. Privileged finally facing justice and victims of drunk drivers who come to support harsh sentence. Brandon brought out of prison looking completely defeated. All her previous arrogance vanished. Judge Caprio enters and Sala becomes. The judge reviews sentencing documents, then looks directly at Brandon. Mr. Whitmore, this is the 4th time he has been convicted of driving under the influence. Each previous time, he received favorable plea bargains. They allowed him to avoid actual prison time, and each time he interpreted that mercy as validation that he was above consequences. When he came to my ward 2 months ago, he displayed an arrogance and contempt for the judicial system that I have rarely seen. He acted like what could be described as hallucinating, someone completely disconnected from reality, who believed that money and surname made him untouchable. He pauses. I hope the last 6 weeks in prison have... He has begun to correct that illusion, but he needs more than correction. He needs fully understand that their actions have consequences, that every time they driving drunk puts lives in danger and will eventually kill someone if not stopped. It changes fundamentally. The judge pronounces sentence. I sentence him to 3 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 18 months if completed substance abuse treatment program. After release, 5 years of probation during which any violation will result to serve the remainder of the 3-year sentence, permanent revocation of license, driving in Rhode Island. If you ever request reinstatement, it will not be before 10 years and only after completing a comprehensive psychological evaluation and residential alcohol treatment program. $50,000 fine to be paid out to victims of drunk drivers. Brandon is openly crying, finally, understanding that the privileged life as she knew it has ended. Her father in the gallery has its head in its hands. His mother is crying, and while Brandon is led out of the courtroom to begin the 3-year sentence, Judge Caprio turns to the next case. Having delivered justice that many felt should have been served arrived 3 days ago. Original hearing video where Brandon was arrested in court goes viral, accumulating 70 million views. Comments say, "Finally, justice for the rich. This judge is a hero. That's right. How the system should work. All hallucinations need Judge Caprio." History becomes a case study on privilege, arrogance, and justice, ultimately prevailing. That's the story of how a Lucen came to believe untouchable in court until Judge Caprio brought him down a peg and burst his bubble of privilege and showed him that no one, absolutely no one, is above law. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. From which city are you watching us writing Justice for Hallucinations? Only 3% leave like. I know of the 3% who believe that privilege shouldn't protect you from consequences. M.